it's our position that the tax court did an admirable job on remand in carrying out this court's mandate.
One of the complications is the Thompsons had other things going on. And the tax court went through and made judgments as to what should be included or what should be credited for the other taxpayers and what should not. Part of the focus of the taxpayers' attack has been on some of the items that have been left out. Justify why they should be left out, why the taxpayers shouldn't be able to include the other benefits they allege that the Thompsons received and have that included within the percentage calculation of what the benefit to the Thompsons of the settlement was.
Do you have a particular one in mind?
Well, I mean, there's a laundry list, right?
Right.
And I realized that I sit here this morning, I have trouble keeping straight in my mind which is which. Some of them operate by a principle. Let's take, for example, the Thompsons were involved in other transactions and got some benefit. In effect, what the tax court said is that, okay, all the penalties and charges for the other transactions will all be wiped out.
Correct.
Well, that's a benefit to the Thompsons. If you have another taxpayer that doesn't have any other transactions that are suspect, they don't get any benefit from that. Why shouldn't that be included in some fashion into the percentage calculation?
But this is the way if this was a rather complicated matter and the tax court had to go through, evaluate each issue. Some of them had made adjustments to the settlement fraction. Other ones it didn't. For example, if the taxpayer had another tax deficiency item that didn't relate to this tax shelter, then they were relieved of that, and that applied to all of the taxpayers.
That seems almost perverse in some fashion. It says that a taxpayer that has other transactions that are called into question may get additional benefit, as the Thompsons did.
Right.
And a taxpayer who does have no other transaction called into question, who otherwise has played it straight, doesn't get any benefit from that. It seems to me, if anything, it might have been more logical the other way around, that why should somebody, I mean, suppose you have another taxpayer involved in this shelter, called Jones, who had all sorts of other abusive deductions. And because he happens to be caught up in this net, he gets the benefit, as the Thompsons apparently did, of having penalties and charges for everything else waived. Whereas somebody else who's played it straight otherwise gets no benefit from that. The tax court could have alternatively figured out the financial benefit, just included as a dollars and cents item, and said, because that's in the end, we're all talking about dollars and cents, and said for Thompson, okay, Thompson, you should have paid X, you had to pay Y, that's my numerator denominator, and we'll apply that across the board. Instead, it comes off as this hybrid, where suggesting if you're involved in other bad transactions, you'll get off the hook. Well, I understand that's one way of doing it, but why isn't that kind of illogical? Because it rewards somebody who's involved in other bad transactions.
I understand what you're saying. In a couple of instances, in the tax court's opinion, it did make specific adjustments relating to the Thompson settlement and gave it to everybody. But we're talking about tax shelters that have over 1,000 taxpayers. So it would have been very difficult for the tax court to go through and look at the situation of 1,000 different taxpayers.
But what it chose to do is say if there are other penalties and charges, they're just gone.
They're gone.
So Jones, whose facts are not in front of us, who happens to have these other disputed tax shelters or claims,
right,
he gets a benefit.
He gets a benefit.
And the tax court, I understand, can't go through all of them and figure out one at a time, but what it chose to do is give a benefit of sorts to the person who has other potentially abusive deductions and no benefit at all to the people who don't, whereas you could have just done it in a dollars and cents fashion, say that the bottom line for Thompson is that he benefited X, and we'll just use that percentage formula and not pay any attention at all to whether there were other transactions going on the return.
And I agree with you, Your Honor. I will say that this court's mandate gave the tax court the discretion to come up with, to the extent possible and practicable,